Dattaji. Well, it's good to be hearing to so many people, and namaste to you all from Kathmandu. Well, I don't have a presentation, but just to build on to the work that the responsibility that I was given was basically to share some of our experience of on development and environment issues from Nepal. So I will dwell into that, but of course, as you have all said, that I will also talk very briefly on the SDG work that Nepal has been taking forward. Well, just to give the context that as our neighboring country, Nepal, well, we do have a lot of issues. At the same time, there's a lot of efforts being taken forward to address the environmental issues as well as the development issue. But at the outset, let me also say that we have a long way to go. Well, for Nepal, like Dr. Sila, you said that, in Assam, you have about 30 million people. I think we're like in size of the population, we're almost there. Like we are 28 million for the country. So your one state is of course equivalent to our country's population. But having said that, there are also very similar kind of problems, I guess, between what you have and what we have. Well, if you look at the context of Nepal with this 28 million population, almost about 21% of the people live below poverty line. So which means there's a lot that we need to do in terms of meeting the basic needs, like the development needs from food security to health issues to education, infrastructure, and much more. The country alone, of course, out of that population, 65 to 70% of the population rely on agriculture, which means that agriculture is a major source of income or the livelihood for the people. And this sector alone contributes nearly 30% to the GDP. So that's also very high. Almost the 1/3 of the GDP also comes from the international remittances. People go out to the Gulf region and other countries where they send money. So that's how the economy is also driven. But at the same time, tourism also seems to be, is also quite high, almost contributing to 8% of the GDP. Well, when you look into these sectors from different angles, that it is a country that is striving to come out and do quite a lot in terms of meeting the needs of the people, development needs. So while saying this is also a very fast growing country. Well, in terms of, if you look at the GDP, or also a lot of the population now wants to move from rural to urban areas. And now when I say this, I also hear the presentation that was done earlier by Deepika ji, that how much the forest and all the rural areas are important for us to even to keep our health going forward. I don't know that everybody living in the urban areas is always means development, or our development, in fact, going to the rural areas and meeting the needs would be a better idea than, everybody coming to a certain area and really, being very compact where no facilities are being met. I think that wouldn't be a very good development. But with this, the country was almost striving at the GDP rate of almost 7%. Now we have, with this COVID, have projected to be less than 1%. So it means there's a huge pressure in the country in terms of meeting its development needs now. Now, of course, if you look at the entire situation, economically, it's not doing well. So the country is now having to rely on its local economy. It means that the local products, local produce, or the income that the local farmers put in, or the small enterprises put in. And that's where the economy has been going strong for this moment. Now, having said that, when you look at our different indicators, Nepal is also very focused on doing the let's say the economic and social development. That's where the focus has been. But lately, there's been a lot of effort with the introduction of the SDG goals. Of course, it was a carry-on over from the MDGs. But the SDG goals have been very important to realize that there's a huge role that the environment has to play if you want to meet our needs, economical and social needs, or that development. Because without having a strong environmental consideration, our development. Sorry, somebody was asking me something.
Yeah, can anybody mute your things, please?
Sorry, so it was someone else. So I will just continue. Well, as I said, like this has been a very strong side that the SDGs also reminds us all that environment is a very strong angle that we need to look into. For instance, whether you talk about the SDG number 1 that talks about ending poverty, or SDG 2 doing hunger, and because for a country like ours, a lot of our income and our livelihoods are based on agroforestry, agriculture and forestry, where people make their livelihoods out of. So if we do not take care of our forests, if we do not take care of our water systems, irrigation systems, then we're not doing good at the development side. Because if you see in the cities, look at the air pollution, that's very high. Look at our waste management, we have not been able to do quite well on that part as well. So looking at the environment has been a solution going forward for this development, or sustainable development part. And I think that almost all the SDGs goals are very much highlight on that part. And for Nepal, we do not have, like in Bangladesh or like in India, a separate cell or institution that looks into SDGs. But the SDG goals have been undertaken or oversighted by the National Planning Commission. And as I said, that this is not something that we would like to achieve differently, but the Nepal's government's priority has been that we take the SDG goals along with our development planning process. So it's been integrated with the national planning process. And there's no something like, just to achieve SDGs, you do this kind of development, and for regular development, you do other. So that has not been the case, but it's very much embedded and integrated into our national system, which means that at the national government, or at the provincial government, or at the local government, all our SDG goals have been integrated. And when the planning is done, this has been very much tracked, that how much of our national planning process is being implemented or achieved by our regular budgetary process. So it's an ongoing process. That's how we Nepal looks into that. But having said that, of course, there's a long way to go to meet those. Some of the things we have been doing quite good, like for instance, immunization or health indicators have been quite good. But there are also certain sectors that we need to do a lot. I mean, in education, the effort is being made, but still there's a lot to do. Similarly, on the environmental fronts, we have a long way to go as well, like controlling the air pollutions and things like that. But one of the very important factors that we have also considered as going forward in terms of achieving the sustainable development is the factors we consider that, and that's the climate change issue. For Nepal, it being a Himalayan country, where of course, I mean, like India or like a similar region, that it is one of the most or highly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. So when the government talks about achieving sustainable development goals or the meeting its development needs, then climate change cannot be forgotten. And this has, and the government of Nepal has taken this very seriously. So if you look into our, after signing the Paris Agreement in 2015, it has made a nationally determined contribution. And then it's looking into various sectors of adaptation and mitigation angles. It also looks into how the capacity building can be done. So there's a special bodies that are looking into this. There's Nepal is currently looking into adaptation actions, which is preparing something called National Adaptation Plan, which means that it will look into adaptation actions for midterm and long-term solutions. And again, when I say this, there's a development effort taking place ahead. There's SDGs goals that the government has to meet by 2030, and of actions. And with this adaptation plans being prepared, all these plans are not going in parallel. In fact, they're all being integrated. So it means that in order to achieve, because for us, if we are to achieve a good indicators, development indicators in agriculture, climate change impacts that quite a lot. Environmental degradation impacts that quite a lot. Taking that into account, the integration part has been taken very strongly. And what the government wants to see is that when the resources are being allocated for the provincial and the local government, it is also the duty of the local government to integrate SDGs, implement the climate change actions, and also the regular development activity within FITES and others, so that the people are benefited with that. When the population are targeted with the poverty activities, that they also see that this population are in fact looking into climate change impacts. In fact, they are meeting the targets of the SDGs. So that's how the integrations are being looked into. So I think this is, in a way, for a small country like Nepal, it's a good way to move forward and see that this integration people actually benefit out of this. At the same time, as I said, like in Bangladesh, they have a good CSO observation and how they have been monitoring. Like that in Nepal, there's also a CSO group network who have been working together to, in fact, have a shadow report on this. What the government.
Hello. Very muted time.
number.
Hello.
Number by
hello, I will continue. So as I was saying that, like in Bangladesh, also in Nepal, we have a CSO groups, and CSOs are very active in terms of advocacy work or monitoring work, and they also bring out the shadow reports and SDGs, for instance. So that this is also a big pressure for the government to see that whatever they claim as achievement going forward is the same thing that the CSOs are doing, because a lot of NGOs and CSOs they go to the rural areas on the ground, they work, they support on water issues or education or income generation, a lot of activity. So does that mean that what the government is saying is also in line with what CSOs are saying? So in that case, government has its own report. They bring it out every year, and in fact, currently the government is working to bring out a report on SDGs to see how the COVID is also going to impact on this, and whether we will be able to meet those targets or not. At the same time, CSOs are doing the same thing on the other side. So how will the COVID impact our meeting the CSO, the SDG target? There's also a report, the shadow report, that comes out on the SDG progress that is being made. So I think this side of government support and the CSOs bringing together makes it very prominent to say that what is the path that is being taken forward. But again, at the end, I mean, I'm almost towards my end. At the end, what I also want to stress is, if we want to achieve this sustainable development goals going forward, with taking into account the environmental consequences, one thing is very clear. That for a country like Nepal, the government of Nepal or the people of Nepal alone cannot do. In order to achieve this, that's why the goal number 17, it talks about partnership, it talks about collaboration, that the other stronger partners are also supposed to support the country like Nepal so that they can meet, whether it's a goal of the Paris Agreement, whether it's SDG goal. In fact, for SDGs, there is no commitment of finance. They don't say that this much amount of money will be provided. But in fact, if you under the Paris Agreement, there's a very concrete financial pledges that the developed countries will have to make. For instance, they will have to give $100 billion by 2020 every year until 2025 to see that climate actions are taking place. I think how do countries like Nepal or in India, Bangladesh take benefit out of this is a very important factor, and we need to keep the pressure high to say that this money actually needs to be delivered. Similarly, if they talk about a partnership under the SDGs goal number 17, similar notion comes in. This support is in terms of financial support, technological support, capacity building part, all this has to come in place. But once this support are coming or is in the process of delivering this resources, what we need to really take into account is there are certain principles we need to take into account. I think it's very clearly said in the earlier presentation. I think the Liam also said very clearly, the issue of equality, the issue of equity. This is between the nations and within the nations. The principle of democratic practices, whether the participation, transparency, accountability, are these all being made or not? And at the end, we also need to see that this, whenever support with, in order to implement our SDG goals, a Paris Agreement, or our regular development, is justice being done or not? Are those the poorest of the poor, most vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, communities on the ground, indigenous people, are they being benefited or not? Are they being part of the solutions or not? I think that is a very fundamental question. If the resources come in, if the government mobilizes resources, and then if that is not really going down to those that are needing the most, then we might be failing again. In 2030 or even 2032, when you reflect back and see 15 years of SDGs, and we see that the divide between the rich and poor is become wider, or those who are really needing the development aid have not been benefited out of it. Only there's a resource capture by the elite. then I think that our government or even our civil society would be failing in that front. So I would say that at the end, to end it, the justice part, the democratic principles, the equality sense, these things have to be taken very strongly when you deliver the SDGs or the climate actions or our regular development activities.